All right. All right. Well, hey, we're going to be in John chapter 19 today. John chapter 19. If you have been with us the last several weeks, you know that what we've been doing is each week we're focusing on a different day of Holy Week. So each week we're focusing on a different day of Holy Week, and Holy Week is the week that Jesus and his disciples were in Jerusalem leading up to his crucifixion and death. So we'll actually remember that in the year starting next week. So next week is Palm Sunday in the church year, but we've been preparing for Holy Week by reflecting on each day of the week each Sunday. So today we've arrived at the Saturday of Holy Week. So this is actually the day between Jesus' death and his resurrection. So it's the kind of thing that many of us just sort of blow by, right? Like, even if you're a Christian person who has followed, who follows along and you observe Good Friday, usually by the time you leave church on Good Friday, you're thinking about what? Sunday, right? But we usually just kind of pass over Saturday. No, we fly over Saturday. Passover is a different thing. So we kind of just fly over Saturday, okay? But we're going to focus on it today. Now, so the passage we're going to read is John chapter 19, verses 38 to 42. And there's a very similar story in all four Gospels. I like this one because a couple of the words, but you could read any of the four and you'll basically get the same gist. It says this: Later, Joseph of Arimathea asked Pilate for the body of Jesus. Now Joseph was a disciple of Jesus, but secretly, because he feared the Jews, meaning the Jewish leaders. Joseph, it seems, was a Jew, actually, himself. With Pilate's permission, he came and took the body away. He was accompanied by Nicodemus, the man who earlier had visited Jesus at night. Nicodemus brought a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 75 pounds. That's a lot. Taking Jesus' body, the two of them wrapped it with the spices in strips of linen. This was in accordance with Jewish burial customs. At the place where Jesus was crucified, there was a garden, and in the garden a new tomb, in which no one had ever been laid. Because it was the Jewish day of preparation, and since the tomb was nearby, they laid Jesus there. So this account makes it sound like it was an act of convenience to use that tomb. Other accounts say the tomb was donated by Joseph. Also, from other spots in the Gospels, we get the information that Nicodemus and Joseph, in one of the other Gospels it says Joseph was on the council, I think meaning like the Jewish council. Nicodemus was a member of the Sanhedrin, which is like a Jewish temple leadership council. So both of them, it seems, were secret disciples of Jesus. It's interesting that they're the ones who prepared Jesus' body for burial. They observe the Jewish custom of burial on Jesus, like for Jesus. So that's just extra color. It's not crucial to what we're going to talk about today. But just to give you a picture, that tomb is like probably like a cave or a carving into the side of a rock area where like you go inside and there are ledges carved into the wall. So I think it's telling us here that it was a new tomb not used by anybody, because like it's actually probable that in most of these tombs there'd already be some bodies on some of those shelves. And I think the picture I'm getting when I read this is Jesus is the only body in that tomb, right? Which, again, maybe inconsequential, maybe significant. But what they would do is they put the body on that stone ledge, let the body decay until they could go in later and take the bones for safekeeping. So it's not like us now where like you put somebody in the ground and then they're there and you don't take them back up. So they would just put it there and then they'd go get the bones later. So they're putting Jesus there in this tomb that's near where the crucifixion happened. So that's all like but here's how I want to repeat this part. Taking Jesus' body, the two of them wrapped it with the spices and strips of linen. This was in accordance with Jewish burial customs. At the place where Jesus was crucified, there was a garden. And in the garden, a new tomb, in which no one had ever been laid. So this is the verse that made me choose this gospel account of all the four. Because listen to that sentence and see how it feels to you to picture this scene. At the place where Jesus was crucified, there was a garden. And in the garden, a new tomb, in which no one had ever been laid. Because it was the Jewish day of preparation, and since the tomb was nearby, they laid Jesus there. Now, like, if you read this account straight through, which I would recommend that you do, one of these Passion accounts, this moment where there's a garden, and in the garden was a new tomb, and because it was close, they laid Jesus there, is like this, it's like fade to black. You know, like there's all this action. There's a standoff in the Garden of Gethsemane. A guy's ear gets cut off and Jesus puts it back on. There's multiple trials. They're taking Jesus from house to all these different places for multiple sham trials. Then they beat him up, and then he carries his cross, and then the curtain is torn and it's dark for 3 hours, and there's an earthquake, and somebody says he really is the Messiah. And like all this stuff is happening, and then there was a garden. In the garden was a new tomb. Because it was close, they laid Jesus there. Fade to black. Because we don't, like, the next verse is more than a day later. So they're laying him to rest Friday before sundown. Because the gospel accounts make a point of telling us that they wanted to get this done before the Sabbath. Because on the Sabbath you should do no work, according to Jewish law. And the Sabbath begins Friday at sundown. And the next verse picks up on Sunday morning. And so it's a fade to black moment. And so after all of that, and like after all the excitement and the stress and the anxiety and the action of Holy Week, where it's like, what's going to happen? Is Jesus the Messiah? Is he going to really let them kill him? And then he does, and what's going to happen next? It's just like, now on Saturday, Jesus is all the way dead. It's like, if we had hope in this moment, this is when we don't. Everybody goes and they just start observing the Sabbath once again because, well, we tried, right? Like, what are we going to do now? On Saturday, Jesus is all the way dead. Everybody go home. There's nothing more to see here. And I imagine, we can imagine how the disciples felt. Throughout this series, as we've been reading these passages, I've been trying to help us imagine how Jesus felt. And we can cobble together what was happening for Jesus on that Saturday. And it was usually when we cobble together what we think was maybe happening in the spiritual realm, we fill it with lots of action. As I was reflecting on this passage this week, I was thinking oh, it's interesting that when we come up with our own image, we're like, well, certainly Jesus wasn't standing still. He's got to do something. Because our assumption is something has to be happening. Somebody has to do something. We can't stand for the fact that there's a whole day in this story where just nothing happens. But that's actually the story that we get in the Gospels. So there's a day in this story where Jesus is all the way dead. Fade to black, it's over. And I think, so what was Jesus doing in this part of the narrative? Nothing. He was dead. There was nothing for him to do. He couldn't do it at this point. There's nothing for him to do. Jesus, the one who made the lame walk and the blind see and raised people from the dead, prayed over them and they came back to life, Jesus himself can do nothing on Saturday. Nothing. He just lays there. His body is in the tomb. I think for us, often in our journeys, there are times when we can't make it work. We keep trying to think of answers or solutions or what we can do or how we can fix it. But when we do, we only make it worse. I was thinking about how this relates, and I was thinking about the times when Aaron and I have arguments. And most of the time, Aaron and I have arguments because we're both trying so hard to make it work, right? The last couple of years, the story of an argument that I've been telling for us is trying to figure out where to put the dog fence. And it was we ended up out, like we live on acreage, and so there's like about 4 acres around our house that's like walkable. And we ended up out in that backyard, like just arguing about whether the fence should go here or here. And we both had good reasons. And like we're in it. And we are like so upset with each other. And then I just paused for a second. I said, I don't know why we're upset with each other. Like that's what I said. Like we're both on the same team. Why are we upset? But it's because we were both just trying and trying and trying, and we couldn't figure it out, so we tried harder, and then we tried harder, and then we tried harder, and before you knew it, we're just like trying so hard, we're destroying the thing. Right? So for us, our toughest arguments are when we're both trying really hard to make it work. Trying harder isn't always the answer. Now listen, if you're a lazy bones, try harder. But trying harder is not always the answer. Trying harder is not always the answer. The fact is, we are not strong enough to fix our own problems. I can say that unequivocally. We are not strong enough to fix our own problems. And the way to fix our problems is not to get stronger. When we start talking about how God makes us new, how Jesus comes to us, and what it means to find new life, we are certainly not strong enough to fix our own problems. And fixing our problems in this case actually means stop trying. Stop striving. Stop trying to get stronger. Embrace your weakness. The story of Jesus and the fact that God brings us life in him hinges on the fact that Jesus rose from the dead. That the world gave their best shot in killing Jesus on a cross, and he overcame it. But Jesus doesn't rise from the dead if he doesn't first die. So even Jesus can't do the whole thing under his own strength. This is the line that sticks with me about Holy Saturday. Resurrection happens in the dark. I first read this in a book by Barbara Brown Taylor called Learning to Walk in the Dark. It's about how to get through tough seasons. And she makes the point that if we believe the gospel narrative, which I do, I think most of you do, if we believe the gospel narrative, so often when we talk about Jesus' resurrection, it's lilies and sunbeams and, right? It's Easter morning. But the resurrection itself happened in the dark. It happened in the tomb. Jesus laid in the tomb, flat on his back, no life in him. Resurrection happens. It's not something Jesus did, but the power of God rose Jesus from the dead. It wasn't Jesus' effort. It wasn't Jesus' ingenuity. It wasn't Jesus' strength. It was actually Jesus at his weakest moment when the greatest thing in our story happened. Resurrection happens in the dark. As we experience the progress of Holy Week, Saturday is this moment where sometimes it feels like we're just waiting for Sunday. We're just waiting for Sunday. But I think we're never just waiting, because the resurrection happens in the waiting. It's when we're willing to wait, when we're willing to stop, when we're willing to allow the peace of the moment, like everything to go fade to black. When we stop trying, stop striving, stop powering up, that's when we begin to get to a place where we can allow God in to do God's work. There's grace in the waiting. Here's from an article about Holy Saturday from Barbara Brown Taylor. That is what Holy Saturday has taught me about being Christian. Between the great dramas of life, there is almost always a time of empty waiting, with nothing to do and no church service to help. A time when it is necessary to come up with your own words and see how they sound, with no other sounds to cover them up. If you are willing to rest in this Sabbath, where you cannot see your hand in front of your face, because it's so dark, and none of your self-protective labors can do you one bit of good. Then you may come as close to the Christ as you will ever get. There in that quiet cave where you wait to see how the maker of all life will choose to come to you in the dark. If you're waiting today for God to show up, remember to wait. If you're waiting today for God to show up, remember that you have to let go of the wheel in order for God to take it. When Aaron and I were arguing about the dog fence, we got to breakthrough when finally we both were willing to stop and realize that, we're not actually opposed to each other. When I said, I don't know why we're so upset with each other right now, then we were able to stop and think, why are we so upset with each other right now? Oh, we're not actually. And when we could stop trying, the insight could come in. The revelation comes when you stop trying to fill in the blank for God, God can fill in the blank for you. So those, for us, the arguments resolve when we take a deep breath and wait for the insight to come. And yeah, there's a second in there where I'm worried that it won't. But I have to resist the urge to fill in the blank myself. I have to wait. And I'll tell you, in my experience, God does show up. I'm consistently afraid he won't, but God does show up in the waiting, in the quiet, in the patience. Amen? Amen.